Rabbi Ari Sittner here talking about the unanswered question. If we look in the Seder, we have a very important component leading up to the 10 plagues, the whole message of Yitzias Mitzrayim. And it begins with Elu Eser Makot Shehevi HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ala Mitzrim B'Mitzrayim. These are the 10 plagues that God brought upon Egypt, Ve'elu Hein. Now let's list them. And the Haggadah goes on to say, Dam, Tzfardei, Akinim, blood, frogs, lice, and it lists all 10 of them. But right after that, Rabbi Yehuda Haya Noten Bahem Simanim. Rabbi Yehuda would give them a sign, an acronym, a mnemonic of Datzach, Adash, Be'achav. And we have to ask three very fundamental questions about this. Rabbi Yehuda was an incredible genius. And what was his contribution to the Haggadah? He said, guess what I can do? I can pull out the first letter of all 10 plagues, and guess what? It spells Datzach, Adash, Be'achav. Why is that so genius? Why is that such an incredible contribution that it's worthy of being in the Haggadah? And furthermore, if you look at the introduction, it says, Rabbi Yehuda haya noten bahem. Noten is present tense. It should say natan. He previously attributed a mnemonic. And finally, why does it say bahem? He gave this mnemonic in them. It really should say lahem. He attributed to them, meaning the 10 plagues, this acronym of Datzach, Adash, Be'achav. And I really scoured to try to find a very fulfilling answer to help me understand, why did Rabbi Yehuda say this? What is his real contribution to the brilliance of the Mesorah that is the Haggadah? And the more I started to dig around, I came across a lot of answers that seemed to justify and rationalize how we can post facto explain Datzach, Adash, Be'achav in our Haggadah. For instance, one of the explanations is that if you add up the gematria, the numerical value, Datzach, Adash, Be'achav equals 501. Why is that important? Because we have another reference in the Haggadah asking us how many were the 10 plagues when you really add up in their full magnitude. So it's either a machlokes of either 50 or 200 or 250. And guess what? If you add those all together, it adds 500. So what does the sum of 500 have to do with this? Well, 500 compared to Datzach, Adash, Be'achav, which is 501, and it's pretty close. And I see a connection, but that didn't do it for me. And we have many such explanations, brilliant, beautiful explanations. But I want to understand it more deeply. I want to understand what Rabbi Yehuda's contribution is. So I asked the following question: who was Rabbi Yehuda? My initial reaction was Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the great Rabbi Yehuda the Prince, but it's not. It's Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai. So let's look throughout Shas and see what Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai teaches us. Rabbi Yehuda says in the Gemara in Kiddushin, number 1, Kol she'eino malamed et beno umnot, anyone that does not teach his child a trade or a craft, malamdo listo, is as if he is teaching him thievery, because the child won't know how to survive honestly in life. Another Mishnah says, Rabbi Yehuda Omer hevi zahir b'talmud, Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, be careful with your teaching, with your studying of Talmud, sheshigiga Talmud ole zadon. Because when you make a mistake in your learning, it's going to ultimately lead to a person making mistakes, doing things on purpose, doing deliberate actions which are prohibited. Rabbi Yehuda is very much a pragmatist. He's saying, teach your kids properly, be careful with your learning. There's a medrash in Bamidbar Rabbah that says that when Bnei Yisrael get to the Yam Suf, to the splitting of the sea, just before the waters split, everyone was arguing with each other, well, who should go in? Why don't you? How about you? I'll do it first. Why don't you do it? Where was Moshe Rabbeinu during all this? So the Medrash says, Nachshon ben Aminadav took the initiative. He just rolled up his sleeves and said, I'm doing it. He jumped into the water, Ba'omayim ad nafesh, and when the water was just up to his nostrils, the sea split. And what happens? It says, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Almighty said to Moshe that you've got the Jewish people struggling at the sea, and what are you doing? V'atam mitpalel. And you're praying. Is that really a time for prayer? Dabra b'nei Yisrael v'yisog. Take the Jews, let's go. This is a time for action. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai says, the message is, Higdil HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shemo Shel Nachshon. God went and ultimately magnified the greatness of Nachshon's name because he was the one to jump in. He wasn't just sitting and giving lip service. He wasn't praying. He was a person of action. That is something that Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai values. Being pragmatic. Being in the moment. We have another Mishnah teaching in Menachot where Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai says that when it comes to the loaves of the Shtei HaLechem and the Lechem HaPanim that were brought into the Mishkan, into the Beit HaMikdash, these loaves have to be a specific dimension. Now, what are these dimensions? So the Mishnah goes on to explain them. But at the very end, it says, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Shelo tita'eh zadad yahaz. What does that mean? Rabbi Yehuda says, so that people don't make a mistake with what the dimensions are, all you have to remember is zadad yahaz. What does that mean? Zayin dalad dalad is 7, 4, 4. Yahaz, 5, 10, 7. As long as you can remember zadad yahaz, you'll remember the exact dimensions. So what we see is that Rabbi Yehuda, being the pragmatist that he was, this isn't the first time in the Haggadah where he's giving us a mnemonic. Being a practical thinker, he's concerned that the average person might forget, might make the mistake, and he's trying to help his students, encourage them to be able to incorporate the message, to remember and to retain it, rather than trying to memorize and ultimately forget. That is starting to give us more of an insight into who Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai ultimately was. And then we have a famous Gemara that we get to during the time of the Sfiras Omer, the Gemara in Yevamos Daf Samach Beis. Shnei Mesar Elav Zugim Talmidim Haylu LeRabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva had 12,000 pairs of students, and they all died beperak echad, in one chapter of time. Why? Mipnei shelo nagu kavod zeh lazeh. They didn't properly ascribe honor to one another. And after they died, Bahaya ha'olam shamim, the world was desolate. There was no more Torah learning that was happening. Ad shebo Rabbi Akiva eitzel rabotenu shabadarom, until Rabbi Akiva came to the south, to the teachers, and Shana Lahem, he taught 5 people. Who were the 5? The 5 were Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua. Those 5, the Heim Hamidu Torah Otosha. Those 5 were the ones who rekindled the learning of Torah during that chapter in Jewish history. And Rabbi Yehuda was one of those people, one of the people who had the great privilege of learning from the famous Rabbi Akiva. So we see Rabbi Yehuda played a pivotal role in Jewish history. And not only that, but even in his youth, the Gemara tells us in Megillah Daf Chaf, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, who was his rabbi, his teacher as a child? Katan hayiti, I was a child, and I learned by Rabbi Tarfon v'Zikanim Belud. I learned from Rabbi Tarfon. So we see he had a very powerful Mesorah. But it doesn't end there. Because if we look earlier in the Haggadah, right after Avadim Hayinu, we have a story of the 5 rabbis that are studying in Bnei Brak. And it says, who were they? Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and who were the last 2? Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon. Those were his 2 main teachers. And they were studying until the students came and said all night long, Rabotenu Higi Zman Kriyat Shema Shel Shachrit. It's time for the morning prayer service already. Why are you still engaged in the Seder? And it's a very powerful question. Number 1, why didn't they know it was time for morning services? And number 2, why were their students not participants in their Seder? Why were just the 5 of them having this lone Seder experience if the whole message of the Pesach Seder is we have an obligation to pass it on to the next generation, parents to their children, teachers to their students? And so in order to understand this, we have to look at the historical context. Rabbi Akiva was living at a time of the Bar Kokhba revolt, the time of Roman oppression, where there was tremendous Jewish bloodshed, where the Jewish people were despondent. And what were they doing? They were hiding. Our tradition says they were studying in a cave, having a secret underground Seder. And the students were outside because of those circumstances. And that's why they didn't know it was time for Shachris. It was time for the morning Shema. The students had to come in. But the biggest question is, Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon were sitting at this Seder. Why was Rabbi Yehuda not there? Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon were his 2 most important teachers. And yet, Rabbi Yehuda was not included in this Seder. Once we look at Rabbi Yehuda through the lens of who he really was, that he was a pragmatist, that he was somebody who gave a siman, a sign, a mnemonic to help the average person. Rabbi Yehuda was someone who said you got to teach your kids properly. You got to be careful not to make mistakes in your learning. He thought about the average person. I suppose he said you have a Jew who doesn't have a Haggadah, who maybe doesn't have a yeshiva or Jewish day school education. How are they supposed to know about the 10 plagues? Are they going to remember Dam Tzvardei Akinim? And so along comes Rabbi Yehuda where he's not at the Seder of the elite, he's among the people. And he comes out and says, Datzach, Adash, be'achav. His whole message was a message to the people, those who were not on the lofty scholarly levels. And he said, just remember these 3 words, and you'll be able to recall all of the different 10 plagues. And that's why it says notain. He's doing it in the present tense. He's here and now working with the people. And when it says bahem, that Rabbi Yehuda gave in them simanim, it's not referring to the 10 plagues that had the acronym, but it's saying bahem as to the Jewish people. He gave to them, to that despondent generation, who were despairing all of the oppression that they saw around them. And he said, guess what? The Jewish people were in this precarious situation before, where we were oppressed, and the Almighty came through and was able to deliver us. All you have to remember in times of despair, you don't have to recall all 10 plagues. Remember something simple. Datzach, Adash, be'achav, and a master teacher will boil down the lesson for their students and be able to say to them, just remember this little bit. There will be redemption. There is hope. And with that message, every one of the Arba Banim, whether it's the wise son who's at the Seder, who's sitting in a cave studying with the great elite, or whether it's the Tam, the She'eni Yedei Lishol, or even the Rasha, every one of them play an important role in being the fabric of the Jewish people. And all of them need hope, need to know that Judaism, lo b'shamayim he, it's not only in the heavens, it's accessible to every person. And Rabbi Yehuda was that Rebbe. He was the one who rekindled the light of Torah for the average person. A message to all of us as we sit at the Pesach Seder, to know how important it is to reach out to every one of our guests, children and grandchildren, and to be able to make sure that they, within their reach, can absorb the message of hope and of redemption, so that we can end the Seder with words that come true, L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim. Amen.